What if I told you that the most dangerous thing you do every day isn't what you eat, how much you sleep, or even stress itself, but what you don't express every time you swallow your emotions, every time you say I'm fine when you're not, every time you push things down instead of letting them out? You're not just coping. You're slowly building pressure inside your mind and body, and one day it breaks. In this video, we're going to explore why emotional release, what psychologists call emotional expression, or emotional ventilation, is not a luxury, it's a necessity, and I'll break it down into 4 powerful psychological truths that might completely change how you deal with your emotions. Let's start with one of the biggest misconceptions people have. I'll just ignore it, it'll go away. But psychology tells us something very different. Emotions are not optional signals. They are biological responses generated by your nervous system. When something affects you, whether it's sadness, anger, fear, or even joy, your brain activates emotional circuits that prepare your body to respond. When you suppress an emotion, you're not deleting it, you're interrupting its natural process. Think of emotions like waves. They're meant to rise, peak, and fall. But when you suppress them, it's like freezing that wave mid-motion. The energy doesn't disappear, it stays trapped. Over time, that trapped emotional energy begins to leak out in other ways. Irritability over small things, sudden emotional outbursts, chronic anxiety, physical symptoms like headaches or fatigue, even burnout or emotional numbness. From a psychological standpoint, this is known as emotional displacement. The original emotion finds another outlet, often in ways that feel confusing or disproportionate. For example, you might feel angry at your boss, but you suppress it. Later, you snap at a loved one over something trivial. The emotion didn't go away. It just changed its target. Even more concerning is what happens long-term. Chronic emotional suppression has been linked to increased stress hormones like cortisol, which can affect your immune system, sleep patterns, and even cardiovascular health. In other words, emotional suppression doesn't just affect your mind, it affects your entire body. Healthy emotional release, on the other hand, allows the nervous system to complete its cycle. When you express what you feel, whether through talking, writing, crying, or even physical movement, you're signaling to your brain. This experience has been processed, and that's what brings relief. Not avoidance, not distraction, but expression. To understand why emotional release is so powerful, we need to talk about your nervous system. Your body operates primarily through 2 key states: the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and recovery. When you experience stress or strong emotions, your body shifts into a heightened state. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your breathing changes. This is not a problem, it's actually a survival mechanism. The problem arises when you get stuck there. When emotions are not expressed, the body often remains in a prolonged state of activation. You might not even notice it consciously, but physiologically your system is on edge. This is why people often say things like, "I feel tense all the time. I can't relax. My mind never stops." That's not just mental, it's biological. Emotional release acts as a regulatory mechanism. When you cry, for example, your body releases stress-related chemicals and activates the parasympathetic system. That's why people often feel calmer after crying, even if the situation hasn't changed. Similarly, talking about your emotions helps organize your thoughts. It engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning and regulation, allowing you to make sense of what you feel instead of being overwhelmed by it. There's even a psychological concept called affect labeling, which shows that simply naming your emotions reduces their intensity. Saying "I feel anxious" is not just a statement, it's an act of regulation. When you don't release emotions, your nervous system stays dysregulated, but when you express them, you help your body return to balance. This is why practices like therapy, journaling, or even honest conversations feel so relieving. They're not just talking, they're recalibrating your entire system. Here's something people rarely consider. When you don't express your emotions, it doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you. Human relationships are built on emotional exchange. We connect through vulnerability, honesty, and shared experiences. When you suppress what you feel, you create a barrier, not just internally, but socially. From the outside, it might look like emotional distance, lack of communication, passive-aggressive behavior, sudden outbursts that seem out of nowhere, but underneath, it's often unprocessed emotion. For example, if you feel hurt but don't express it, that hurt doesn't disappear. It builds into resentment, and resentment, when unspoken, tends to show up indirectly through tone, behavior, or withdrawal. Over time, this erodes trust, not because you're a bad person, but because you're not being emotionally transparent. Psychology emphasizes the importance of emotional congruence, the alignment between what you feel and what you express. When there's a mismatch, relationships suffer. People can sense when something is off, even if they can't explain it. On the other hand, healthy emotional expression strengthens relationships. It creates clarity, reduces misunderstandings, and fosters deeper connection. Saying things like that hurt me. I feel overwhelmed. I need support right now. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of emotional intelligence, and perhaps most importantly, emotional release prevents emotional explosions. When you regularly express what you feel in small, manageable ways, you reduce the likelihood of overwhelming breakdowns or conflicts. Think of it like pressure in a system. Release it gradually, and everything stays stable. Suppress it, and eventually it bursts. There's a common belief that being strong means holding everything in. But psychology suggests the opposite. True mental strength comes from understanding and processing your emotions, not avoiding them. When you allow yourself to feel and express emotions, you gain insight into your inner world. What triggers you, what matters to you, what your needs are, where your boundaries should be. This is called self-awareness, and it's one of the most important components of psychological well-being. Without emotional release, self-awareness becomes almost impossible. Why? Because you're constantly bypassing your own internal signals. Imagine trying to understand a language while muting every word. That's what emotional suppression does. On the other hand, when you regularly check in with your emotions through journaling, reflection, or conversation, you start to recognize patterns. You begin to understand not just what you feel, but why you feel it. And that awareness gives you power. It allows you to respond instead of react, to choose your actions instead of being controlled by unconscious emotional buildup. There's also a resilience aspect to this. People who are comfortable expressing emotions tend to recover faster from stress and adversity. They process experiences instead of carrying them indefinitely. They don't avoid pain, they move through it. And that's what makes them strong. Emotional release is not about losing control, it's about gaining control through understanding. So the next time you feel something, anything, don't rush to push it away. Pause, acknowledge it, express it. Because your emotions are not the problem. Silencing them is. And remember, feeling is not weakness, it's human. And expressing it might be one of the healthiest things you ever learn to do.